My son said I was a burden at 72, so I quietly walked away. The day my son told me I was becoming a burden, he didn't know I was standing outside the kitchen door. "I love Mom," he said with a tired sigh, "but we can't keep putting our lives on hold forever." His wife didn't answer immediately. Then she whispered, "Maybe it's time we find her a retirement home." I stood there in silence, my grocery bag slipping from my hands as apples rolled across the floor. Neither of them noticed. At 72 years old, after spending my entire life sacrificing everything for my family, I realized something heartbreaking. Sometimes the people you love the most slowly stop seeing you as a person. They only see the inconvenience. I quietly picked up the apples, wiped away my tears before entering the kitchen, and pretended I hadn't heard a single word. That night, I couldn't sleep. Instead, I sat by the window looking through an old photo album. There was my son at 5 years old, smiling with 2 missing front teeth. There he was at 12, holding the bicycle I bought him after working double shifts for nearly 6 months. Then his graduation picture, his wedding. Every photograph reminded me of something I had given up so he could have a better life. After my husband died 20 years earlier, I raised him alone. I skipped meals so he could eat better. I wore the same winter coat for 8 years because college tuition mattered more than new clothes. I never complained. Not once. Because that's what mothers do. The next morning, I made breakfast as usual. His favorite pancakes. He barely looked up from his phone. "Thanks, Mom." That was all. No smile. No conversation. Just 2 words. Later that afternoon, I walked to the local bank. The young teller greeted me politely. "I'd like to access my safety deposit box," I said. Inside was a small envelope my late husband had left for me. It contained the deed to a small lakeside cabin he had secretly purchased decades ago. "We'll retire here one day," he had once told me. But cancer took him before we ever had the chance. I had forgotten about the cabin. Or perhaps I had simply forgotten that I still had somewhere to belong. 2 weeks later, while my son was at work, I packed 1 suitcase. I left the house spotless. On the kitchen table, I placed a handwritten letter. "My dear son, you don't need to feel guilty anymore. I'm leaving because I want both of us to have peace. Thank you for the years we shared. Take care of your family. I'll take care of myself. Love, Mom." No accusation, no anger, no blame. Just goodbye. The cabin was smaller than I remembered. Dust covered nearly every surface. The roof leaked whenever it rained. The furniture looked older than I did. But for the first time in years, the silence felt peaceful instead of lonely. Every morning, I watched the sunrise over the lake with a warm cup of tea. I planted tomatoes behind the cabin. I learned the names of my neighbors. One of them, a retired carpenter named Henry, helped me repair the porch without asking for anything in return. "You've got good hands," he laughed. "You just forgot how capable they still are." Little by little, I smiled again. Months passed. One afternoon, I began volunteering at the local library, reading stories to children after school. They listened as if every word mattered. When I finished each story, tiny hands reached up to hug me. "See you tomorrow, Miss Eleanor." Those words healed parts of my heart I thought were gone forever. Then, one rainy evening, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, my son stood there. His clothes were soaked. His eyes were red. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he whispered, "I've been looking everywhere for you." I simply stepped aside. "Come in." He looked around the little cabin, at the flowers, at the books, at the fresh bread cooling on the counter. "You look." He stopped himself. "You look happy." I smiled gently. "I am."
He lowered his head. "I read your letter at least 100 times. I kept waiting for you to call. You never did. I thought you hated me." I slowly shook my head. "No, I just stopped waiting to be chosen." Tears filled his eyes. I was wrong. I became so busy building my own life that I forgot who built it for me. He covered his face with both hands. I'm so sorry. For the first time in years, I saw my little boy again. Not the exhausted man. Not the distracted father. Just my son. I reached over and held his hand. I forgive you. He looked up surprised. Just like that? I nodded. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain. It simply refuses to let pain become the end of the story. He stayed all afternoon. We cooked together. We laughed about old family memories. Before leaving, he asked quietly, "Would you come home?" I looked around the cabin, at the garden, at the lake, at the peaceful life I had rebuilt with my own hands. Then I smiled. This is my home now, but you're welcome here anytime. From that day forward, he visited every weekend. Sometimes alone. Sometimes with his wife. Eventually, with my grandchildren. The little cabin became the place where birthdays were celebrated, fish were caught, stories were shared, and broken relationships slowly healed. One summer afternoon, my oldest granddaughter climbed onto my lap. "Grandma," she asked, "why do you always smile?" I kissed the top of her head. "Because I finally learned something." "What?" "Growing older doesn't mean your life becomes smaller. Sometimes, it finally becomes your own. If this story teaches anything, it's this. Never measure a person's worth by how much they can still do for you. One day, every parent becomes slower. Their hands shake, their steps become shorter. But those same hands once carried you. Those same steps once walked miles, so yours could be easier. Love them while you still can, because the greatest regret isn't losing someone. It's realizing too late how deeply they loved you all along.
If this story stayed with you, if it touched something deep inside you, please leave a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for being here.